Imagine crossing the Atlantic, like in just over 3 hours,
Yeah.
looking down and seeing the curve of the Earth from your window,
Wow.
and getting to London before you even left, like time travel style.
That's wild.
Well, that was the reality on the Concorde.
The Concorde, huh?
Yeah, this supersonic legend. Welcome to our deep dive into its story.
Deep dive. Love it.
We've got a ton of sources, articles, transcripts, firsthand stories, you name it.
Sounds like quite the stack.
It is all to figure out this engineering marvel.
I'm intrigued already.
Today's mission is to understand why this plane, the speed demon, faster than a speeding bullet,
Okay. Yeah.
vanished from the skies.
A plane that fast? Gone. I'm all ears.
What gets me is how bold the whole idea was.
Bold, how so?
Well, our sources take us back to the 1950s when supersonic passenger travel was just a dream.
Ah, the early days.
And they follow it all the way through to the Concorde's last flights in 2003.
Wow. So the whole story?
The whole thing, the development, the partnership between Britain and France.
I've heard about that. A real collaboration.
Big time. And the tech, it was revolutionary.
Had to be to go that fast.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's the operational history, the highs and lows, and of course that tragedy.
At the crash.
It's all in there. Plus, we've got those personal accounts, the human side of this amazing machine.
The human element is so important, especially with something like this.
For sure. So by the end of this, you won't just know the dates and facts. You'll
Right.
understand the whole picture, the technology, the economics, the environment,
Makes sense.
and how they all came together to decide the Concorde's fate.
It's like a puzzle, all these pieces.
Exactly. Okay, so back to the start. The need for speed.
Have speed.
The 1950s were all about ambition, pushing the limits.
Ah, the jet age.
Right. It wasn't just about faster travel as a race,
Like a competition.
Totally. The US, the UK, France, even the Soviet Union,
Wow, the big players.
all vying for supersonic bragging rights. One source even calls it a vanity race.
Vanity race. I like that, like a race for prestige.
Absolutely. It wasn't just a commercial thing.
More than that, huh?
Way more. It was about national pride, proving who had the best tech.
Classic Cold War stuff.
Totally. But turning those dreams into reality, that was a whole other challenge.
Yeah, I bet.
Our sources make it clear the engineering was immense.
What was the biggest hurdle?
Aerodynamic resistance, the drag.
Drag, like wind resistant.
Yeah, but way worse when you're approaching the speed of sound.
Gotcha. So how'd they deal with that?
That's where the Concorde iconic shape comes in.
Those sleek wings, right?
Exactly. One source calls them ogival delta wings.
Ogival delta wings.
Yeah.
Fancy.
Yeah, super technical. But basically, those long, slender wings were key.
They look so cool, though.
They do, but there's a trade-off. They needed crazy long runways for takeoff and landing.
Ah, so not so practical.
Not really. Plus, those landing speeds were super high.
So form over function in a way.
You could say that. It was a beautiful design, but not without its drawbacks.
Interesting. So those ambitions must have been expensive.
Oh, massively. That's where the British and French partnership comes in.
Makes sense. Share the costs.
Exactly. So, as our sources tell it, both countries were working on their own designs.
Separate projects, huh?
Yeah, the British had the Model 223 and the French the Super Caravelle.
Cool names.
But the costs were just astronomical.
I can imagine.
The British government basically said, find a partner or we're pulling the plug.
Wow. Strong arm tactics.
Kind of. And France was the only one with the same level of ambition, the same drive.
A match made in the sky.
Exactly. So in 1962, they signed this formal treaty.
A big deal.
Huge. And the name they chose, Concorde, it meant agreement, harmony.
A fitting name.
Totally. Though even the spelling caused a little spat at first.
Really?
Yeah, the French wanted the E at the end, the British didn't.
A tale of two spellings?
Funny, right. But despite all these hurdles, there was still so much optimism.
People were excited.
Oh, yeah. Big airlines were placing orders. Pan Am, Air France, British Airways.
The big leagues.
The best. They even had orders for 100 planes.
Wow, so they were confident it would be a hit.
Totally. And when construction started on the prototypes in 65,
One in each country.
yep, it felt like a new era was dawning. And then the first flight in 69,
Must have been an amazing sight.
incredible. And later that year, breaking the sound barrier.
Wow, a historic moment.
Absolutely. The Concorde was a showstopper at the Paris Air Show.
Everyone wanted to see it, I bet.
Oh, yeah. It felt like anything was possible. But that initial hype,
Didn't last.
sadly, no. This is where things get tricky.
What happened?
while the early 70s were a roller coaster for the Concorde.
Roller coaster, how so?
It peaked in orders in 72.
Sounds promising.
It was, but then came the 1973 oil crisis.
Ah, that was a tough time.
Big time. Suddenly, fuel efficiency became a major concern.
Yeah, the Concorde wasn't exactly known for that.
Definitely not. And then there were the environmental concerns, the noise pollution, the emissions.
Right, people were starting to think about those things more.
Absolutely. Airlines started to worry, would the Concorde be profitable in the long run?
It's business after all.
Exactly. And just like that, those early orders started to disappear.
So the dream was starting to fade.
Yeah, a bit. One source says most of the airlines canceled their orders in 73 alone.
Ouch, that's gotta hurt.
It was a huge blow. But somehow the project kept going.
How'd they manage that?
Sheer determination, I guess. In the end, only Air France and British Airways stuck with it.
Loyal customers.
For sure. And even they needed government subsidies to make it work.
So the governments really believed in it.
They did. But only 20 Concordes were ever built, including the prototypes.
A far cry from those early 100 plane orders.
A big difference. And the development costs. They went through the roof, 6 times the original estimates.
So it was always facing an uphill battle financially.
Always. But even though it wasn't a commercial success, it was still an engineering marvel.
Oh yeah, the tech was groundbreaking.
Truly. Those Delta Wings weren't just for looks, they were essential for supersonic flight.
They made it all possible.
And those Rolls-Royce Olympus engines, they were originally for a bomber.
No way. Talk about repurposing.
Right, and then they added those powerful afterburners.
Gotta go fast.
Gotta go fast. One source even quotes NASA engineers saying the Concorde was more complex than the Apollo program.
Wow, that puts it in perspective.
Definitely. The Concorde pushed the boundaries of what was possible in aviation.
I bet it was packed with innovations.
Oh, tons. Like the fly-by-wire control system, a first for a commercial airliner.
Explain that. What's fly-by-wire?
So basically, instead of mechanical controls, the pilot's commands are transmitted electronically.
Oh, so like a computer interface.
Exactly. Super advanced for the time. And the avionics, the electronic systems, they were cutting edge too.
So not just about speed, but smarts too.
Exactly. And then you've got those iconic design features.
Like the droop nose.
Yeah, that was so cool. It would lower during takeoff and landing
Why was that?
to help the pilots see better.
See better.
Yeah, the Concorde would be tilted way up at those times, so they needed a clear view of the runway.
Ah, makes sense. So it wasn't just for show, it was functional.
Totally. And it needed a tail wheel, too, to prevent the tail from scraping the ground.
Because of that tilt.
Exactly. It's these little details that make the engineering so impressive.
And the fuel system, I've heard that was crazy complicated.
Oh, yeah. Managing all that fuel at those speeds was a challenge.
How much fuel did it even use?
A ton, like 22,500 kilograms per hour at full power with the afterburners on.
That's insane.
It is. But the fuel system wasn't just about carrying all that fuel.
It had another purpose.
It was also about balance, keeping the Concorde's center of gravity stable.
Balance. That's important at any speed.
Crucial, especially at supersonic speeds. The Concorde's center of gravity could shift by over a meter during flight.
A meter. That's a lot.
It is. So they had this system of 13 fuel tanks.
13 tanks.
Yeah, and they'd pump fuel between them to keep the plane balanced.
Wow. So it was constantly adjusting.
All the time, managed by the flight engineers.
Sounds like a full-time job.
It was a super smart solution to a complex problem.
Makes you appreciate the engineering even more.
For sure. And then there's the engine air intakes.
Not about that.
Well, they had to deal with the shock waves created at supersonic speeds.
Shockwaves, those are dangerous, right?
They can be, especially for engines. So the intakes were designed to slow down the airflow before it reached the engines.
Like a buffer zone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing design, right?
Totally. And I've heard the Concorde actually got longer during flight.
It did. Because of the heat from air friction.
Wait, it stretched?
Yeah, the fuselage could lengthen by 20 to 25 centimeters.
That's crazy. So the plane was literally expanding.
It was. There are stories of gaps appearing inside the cabin.
Like you could see through them.
Yeah. One source talks about someone fitting a newspaper into a gap that closed up when the plane landed.
Wild. So it was constantly changing shape in the air.
Pretty much. And the nose could reach 127 degrees Celsius.
Ouch, hot.
Yeah, it was intense. And even with those high takeoff and landing speeds,
Which were?
about 400 kilometers per hour for takeoff, 290 for landing.
That's still pretty fast.
Super fast. But surprisingly, it needed similar runway lengths to a Boeing 747.
Really? I would thought it needed way more space.
Nope, the braking system was incredible. It could stop the Concorde from 300 kilometers per hour in just 1,600 meters.
Talk about stopping power.
Right. And those brakes would get super hot, like 300 to 500 degrees Celsius.
Wow, it's amazing the plane could handle all that.
It's a testament to the engineering, for sure. And of course, we can't forget the speed.
Main attraction.
The Concorde could cross the Atlantic in 3.5 hours.
That's less than half the time of a regular flight.
Crazy fast. It cruised at Mach 2.04, which is like 2,179 kilometers per hour.
And it's 60,000 feet. Way up there.
So high. One source says British Airways' Concorde fleet alone flew supersonic for over 100,000 hours.
That's more than any air force in the world at the time.
It's mind-blowing, and flying on the Concorde, it was pure luxury.
I bet it was expensive.
Oh yeah, tickets were like $9,000 to $10,000.
Wow, so it was really for the elite.
It was the ultimate travel experience.
Right.
But then, tragedy struck.
The crash.
Yeah. Up until July 25, 2000, the Concorde had this perfect safety record.
It was known for being safe.
The safest. Over 30 years without a single accident.
That's incredible for such a complex plane.
It is. But then Air France Flight 4590 crashed just after takeoff.
But terrible day for aviation.
It was. It killed everyone on board, 100 passengers and 9 crew, plus 4 people on the ground.
Devastating.
The investigation showed it was a series of unfortunate events.
Like what?
A titanium strip from another plane had fallen on the runway.
A piece of debris.
Yeah, and it punctured one of the Concorde's tires during takeoff.
At that speed, that's got to be bad.
It was. The tire exploded, sending debris into a fuel tank.
Causing a fire.
A huge fire. And then some electrical cables were severed, creating sparks that ignited the fuel.
So a chain reaction?
A terrible chain reaction. The cockpit recordings are just heartbreaking.
Must be tough to listen to.
They are, but even in that chaos, the captain, Christian Marty, he kept trying.
What did he do?
He knew he couldn't abort the takeoff at that speed. It would have been worse.
So he kept going.
He tried to reach another airport for an emergency landing.
But he didn't make it.
No, he crashed near a hotel. But they say his actions might have saved lives on the ground.
True hero.
He was. After the crash, all the Air France Concordes were grounded.
Makes sense. They had to figure out what went wrong.
Absolutely. They did a huge investigation and made some big safety changes.
Like what?
They reinforced the tires, added Kevlar lining to the fuel tanks, and improved the electrical wiring.
To prevent that kind of accident from happening again?
Exactly. It took over a year, but Concorde flights resumed in November 2001.
So it came back.
It did. But the world was different, especially after 9/11.
Air travel was never the same.
You're right. People were nervous, and ticket sales were way down.
Plus, those economic challenges were still there.
They were. The Concorde was getting older, maintenance was getting expensive, and fuel prices were rising.
A tough combination.
It was. It just wasn't sustainable anymore.
So the end was near.
It was. In April 2003, Air France and British Airways both announced they were retiring the Concorde.
The sad day.
Very sad. The last passenger flights were in October 2003.
The end of an era.
The end. The Concorde went from this symbol of the future to a museum piece.
A reminder of what was.
Exactly. But its legacy lives on.
It does. It's a symbol of human ambition and ingenuity.
Absolutely. That sleek design, that groundbreaking tech, it still captures our imagination.
An icon.
It is. And the dream of supersonic travel, it hasn't died.
There are new projects in the works, right?
Yeah. Companies like Boom Technology are trying to bring it back.
With planes like the Overture.
Exactly. Will they succeed where the Concorde failed? We'll see.
Time will tell.
Time will tell. But one thing's for sure, we still crave that speed.
The need for speed never goes away.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's recap what we've learned.
Okay, shoot.
We've gone through the Concorde's whole story, from those ambitious beginnings to those amazing technological breakthroughs.
Yeah.
We've seen how it faced economic hurdles, environmental concerns, and of course, that tragic accident.
It's a complex story.
It is. And it shows us that even groundbreaking innovations aren't always guaranteed success.
Sometimes it's just not meant to be.
Sometimes. But the Concorde story also reminds us of the power of human ingenuity and the enduring allure of pushing the limits.
It's inspiring, in a way.
It is. So here's a final thought for you to ponder.
Okay, hit me.
With all the tech advancements since the Concorde and this renewed interest in supersonic travel,
Yeah.
what do you think the future holds? Will we see routine supersonic flights again? Will we learn from the Concorde's successes and failures? Or will it remain a legendary but fleeting chapter in aviation history?
I don't know. It's a tough question.
It is, but it's one worth thinking about. As they say, sky's the limit. Or maybe, in this case, not even that.
Not even that.
Thanks for joining our deep dive. Until next time.
See ya.